Welcome to the Epic Bible Stories channel. The roar of the Persian Empire thundered across continents, reaching from the borders of India to the heart of Ethiopia. Under the command of one man, King Ahasuerus, 127 provinces stood united beneath his rule. His royal palace in Susa gleamed as a monument to unmatched wealth and glory, a symbol of his dominion. But behind the golden walls, a dark conspiracy stirred. A hidden scheme was unfolding, a royal decree that would seal the fate of an entire nation, the Jews. Yet in the shadows of this impending peril, God had already positioned a savior, a woman, on the throne. At the height of his reign, King Ahasuerus hosted a grand banquet, a lavish celebration soaked in luxury and pride. Inside the marble halls of the palace, Queen Esther wandered with hesitant steps, her eyes full of unease. The king's signet was pressed onto a deadly decree, the extermination of her people. Meanwhile, Mordecai stood in the city streets, tearing his garments in anguish, wailing in despair. And in the court's heart stood Haman, cloaked in deceit and ambition, smiling as he persuaded the king to annihilate the Hebrews. Esther, knowing the cost, trembled before the entrance to the royal hall. To walk in uninvited was to risk death. But soon a dinner would be held, a banquet where the destiny of an entire nation would turn on a single revelation. And Haman, once confident, would watch in horror as his own fate unraveled. This is not merely a tale from antiquity. It is the story of a woman appointed in a time of crisis, a woman who braved death, stood for her people, and whose voice reshaped history. She could stay silent, or she could speak and risk everything. The enemy had sealed their plan, but heaven had already prepared the victory. How did an orphaned girl become a queen? How did betrayal nearly extinguish an entire race? And how did a silent, invisible God rewrite the course of history? This is more than a story. It is a timeless message for all generations. For such a time as this is the Book of Esther, the movie. It was the third year of Ahasuerus' reign. From India to Ethiopia, his scepter stretched across 127 provinces. He was a king not only of vast power, but of insatiable pride. He sought to flaunt his glory before the world, so he hosted a feast unlike any other. For 180 days, nobles and princes indulged in extravagance, and when that time passed, he opened the banquet to the entire capital. Wine flowed freely. Golden chalices caught the glow of chandeliers. Laughter rang through the palace gardens. But the king, intoxicated with power and wine, wanted more. "Bring Queen Vashti," he ordered. "Let her beauty be displayed before all." But Queen Vashti refused. A single act of defiance silenced the entire celebration. Ahasuerus, humiliated, sat in stunned silence. If his queen could disobey him openly, what message would it send to the empire's women? His advisors warned him, if Vashti goes unpunished, wives across the kingdom will defy their husbands. And so the king issued an irrevocable decree. Vashti was banished from his presence, her royal crown stripped, her name erased from court. But time passed, and the king's anger cooled. He missed his queen, he regretted his decree. And once again, his advisors stepped in with counsel. "Let the most beautiful young women be gathered from every province," they said. "Bring them to the palace, prepare them, and from them let the king choose a new queen." The search began. From the largest cities to the smallest villages, royal officials sought out the fairest maidens. And among them was one whose story had been written by God long before she was born. In the city of Susa lived a young Hebrew woman named Hadassah. Orphaned and raised by her cousin Mordecai, she was faithful, wise, and righteous. When the king's officers arrived, Hadassah was taken from her home to the palace. Before she left, Mordecai gave her a solemn command. "Do not reveal your identity. Tell no one you are a Jew. Keep your heritage a secret until the time is right. And so Hadassah became Esther. In the palace, the young women were prepared for a year, 12 months of treatments, perfumes, and training. But Esther was different. From her first day, she found favor with Haggai, the custodian of the harem. She was given the best food, the finest garments, and special care. When it was her turn to be presented to the king, she asked for nothing extra. She came as she was. And when Ahasuerus saw her, his heart was captivated. He loved her more than all the others. That very day, he placed the royal crown upon her head. Esther, the orphan and foreigner, became Queen of Persia. But neither she nor the king knew that. She had been placed there by divine design for a mission that would soon unfold. Esther, now Queen of Persia, was celebrated throughout the land. The people of Susa rejoiced, and the king held a grand banquet in her honor. But outside the palace walls, a silent threat began to rise. Mordecai, her faithful cousin, served at the king's gate. One day, he overheard two royal guards whispering in the shadows. Their words were venom. The king has ruled long enough. The time has come to end him. It was a plot, an assassination attempt against Ahasuerus. Mordecai acted without delay. He sent word to Esther, and she warned the king in his name. The conspirators were caught, interrogated, and executed. Mordecai's loyalty was recorded in the royal chronicles, but soon forgotten. No reward was given, no honor bestowed. But God does not forget, and soon that simple act would shake the empire. Meanwhile, a new figure was rising in the court. Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, an ancient enemy of the Jews. The king elevated him above all nobles, granting him authority second only to his own. And with his newfound power, Haman demanded worship. Every man at the gate bowed in submission, except one. Mordecai stood firm, his back unbent, his eyes unwavering. When asked why, he gave a quiet but resolute answer: "I am a Jew. I do not bow to men." Haman's pride ignited into rage, but the hatred that consumed him extended beyond Mordecai. No, he would not be satisfied with one man's death. He wanted an entire people erased. He approached the king with cunning words. "O king, there is a certain people scattered throughout your provinces. Their customs are strange. Their laws differ from ours. They do not follow your decrees. It is not in your interest to let them live. Let a decree be written to destroy them, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver to the royal treasury." The king, oblivious to Haman's true intent, gave him his royal ring, his authority, and without questions, without investigation, a decree was sealed, a death sentence written in stone. Messengers rode out across the empire. From India to Ethiopia, the orders were clear. On the 13th day of the month of Adar, all Jews, young and old, men and women, were to be annihilated. The fate of an entire people was sealed in wax and blood. When Mordecai learned of the decree, he tore his garments, clothed himself in sackcloth, and sat in ashes. He wept loudly through the streets of Susa. In every city, the cries of the Jews rose like incense to heaven. But in the palace, Esther remained unaware. Not until her maidservant saw Mordecai at the gate and sent word. Deeply troubled, she dispatched a servant to ask what had happened. Mordecai's reply was a message heavy with urgency. "Our people are condemned. You must go before the king. You must plead for us." Esther's heart pounded. What Mordecai asked was forbidden. "Everyone knows," she replied, "that no one can approach the king uninvited. The penalty is death unless he extends the golden scepter, and I have not been summoned in 30 days. Mordecai's next message struck her soul like lightning. "Do not think you will escape because you live in the palace. If you remain silent, deliverance will come from elsewhere, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows, Perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this." Esther stood still, the weight of destiny resting on her shoulders. Yes, she had been chosen. Yes, she had been crowned, not by accident, but by divine appointment. She sent her answer, "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa, fast for me 3 days and 3 nights. I and my maids will do the same. Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." The decision was made. Esther had chosen her path. 3 days of fasting, prayer, and preparation passed. Then she rose to meet her destiny. The 3rd day arrived. Esther, having fasted and prayed, adorned herself in her royal robes, but beneath the gold and jewels beat a heart that had already surrendered to death. Every step she took toward the throne room echoed with finality. The great hall shimmered with golden lamps. King Ahasuerus sat high upon his ivory and silver throne. Armed guards lined the path. Their orders were clear. No one entered unbidden. The punishment was death. Then the doors opened. Esther stepped forward. The courtiers froze in terror. They knew what the law demanded. No exception, not even for a queen. The king looked up, and time seemed to halt. There she stood, radiant, solemn, eyes hollowed by fasting, yet full of courage. She did not flinch. She did not bow. She stood, still and silent as judgment loomed. Then, in a moment divinely stirred, the king extended his golden scepter. A gasp of relief rippled through the hall. Esther would live. "What troubles you, Queen Esther?" the king asked gently. "What is your request? Even up to half my kingdom it shall be granted." "With grace," Esther replied, "if I have found favor in your sight, O king, I request only this. Come to a banquet I have prepared, you and Haman." The king smiled. A private feast with the queen, it was a joyous invitation. Haman was summoned, unaware that his pride was leading him to his downfall. That night, the banquet was held. The table overflowed with delicacies. Golden goblets glistened with royal wine. Haman's chest swelled with pride, dining privately with the king and queen. But as he left the palace, his triumph soured. At the gate stood Mordecai, again, unbowed, unmoved, unbroken. Fury consumed Haman. He rushed home, enraged, and confessed his hatred to his wife Zeresh and his advisors. "All my honor means nothing," he cried, "as long as that Jew Mordecai is alive." His wife offered dark counsel. "Build a gallows 25 meters high. Ask the king for permission to hang him tomorrow. Then go and enjoy the banquet in peace." Haman smiled wickedly. He ordered the gallows built that very night. But while Haman plotted revenge, God stirred restlessness in the palace. That night, the king could not sleep. He tossed and turned. He called for the royal records to be read aloud, and by divine design, the scribes opened to a long-forgotten entry. The day Mordecai saved the king's life by exposing the conspirators. The king sat upright. "What honor has been given to Mordecai for this?" "None, O king," the scribes replied. At that very moment, footsteps echoed through the corridor. Haman had arrived, intent on requesting Mordecai's death. But before he could speak, the king asked him, "Haman, what should be done for the man the king desires to honor?" Haman, swollen with self-love, thought, "Surely he means me." So he answered with theatrical grandeur, "Let the man be clothed in royal garments. Let him ride the king's horse. Let a crown be set upon his head, and a noble prince lead him through the city, shouting, 'This is what is done for the one the king delights to honor.'" The king smiled. "Excellent. Go at once. Do all you have said for Mordecai the Jew." Silence. Haman's soul collapsed, but he could not protest. That very morning, pale with rage and humiliation, Haman dressed Mordecai in royal robes, led him through the streets of Susa, proclaiming honor for the man he intended to kill. People watched in astonishment. God was beginning to turn the tide, but the day was not over. That evening, Haman arrived at Esther's second banquet, his pride shattered, his spirit uneasy. The table was splendid, but dread hung in the air. The king turned to Esther once more. "What is your request, Queen Esther? Even up to half the kingdom, it shall be granted." Esther's voice trembled but did not falter. "If I have found favor in your eyes, O king, grant me my life and the lives of my people. For we have been sold to be destroyed, annihilated. If we were merely to be enslaved, I would have remained silent. But this is death, and I cannot be silent." The king's eyes burned with fury. "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do this?" Esther turned to her left. "The adversary, the enemy, is this wicked man, Haman." Haman's face drained of color. His legs trembled. Terror overtook him. The king rose in a storm of rage and walked into the garden. Haman fell at Esther's feet, begging for mercy. But when the king returned and saw Haman collapsed on his queen, his wrath exploded. "Would you assault the queen here in my own house?" That was the end. The guards seized Haman. A servant spoke up. "O king, Haman has built a gallows 25 meters high to hang Mordecai, the man who saved your life." The king's command was swift and final. "Hang him on it." And so on the very gallows he prepared for the righteous, Haman was executed. Thus ended the man who sought to destroy God's people. Though Haman was dead, the threat had not vanished. The decree, the law that condemned the Jews, was still in effect. It had been sealed with the king's ring, and by Persian law, no decree could be revoked. Across the empire, enemies were still prepared to strike on the 13th day of Adar, but Esther was not done. Once again, she risked her life and appeared uninvited before the king. Tears welled in her eyes. Her voice trembled as she knelt. "If I have found favor with you, if it pleases the king, let my life and the lives of my people be spared. Please revoke the decree that Haman wrote. Do not let us perish." The king, moved once more by Esther's plea, knew he could not nullify the old decree, but he could issue a new one. He summoned Mordecai and handed him the royal signet ring. "Write on behalf of the Jews," he said, "whatever you think is best." And so Mordecai wrote a new decree, sealed with the king's authority. From India to Ethiopia, the Jews were granted the right to defend themselves. They could gather together, take up arms, and fight back against anyone who would attack them. Messengers mounted royal horses and rode with urgency through the empire's vast provinces. From city to city, the new edict brought a glimmer of hope. The Jews, once marked for extinction, now had the power to stand and survive. And then the day came, the 13th of Adar. Across the empire, enemies rose against the Jews, as the original decree had instructed. But now the Jews were ready. They stood side by side, united and fearless, and by the hand of God they prevailed. In Susa alone, they struck down hundreds. Across the kingdom, 75,000 of their enemies fell, including Haman's 10 sons, who were executed and hanged, just as their father had been. But the Jews took no plunder. There was no vengeance, no greed, only self-defense, justice, and the fulfillment of divine protection. The streets of Persia echoed with a different sound, rejoicing. Sorrow turned into dancing. Fear gave way to honor. Mordecai, once a humble servant at the gate, was now the king's highest advisor, second only to Ahasuerus himself. Clothed in royal robes, beloved by his people, and revered throughout the provinces. Together, Mordecai and Esther established a new tradition, the festival of Purim, a celebration of life, deliverance, and divine intervention. They sent letters to every province, commanding the Jews to commemorate those days year after year with feasting and gladness. To this very day, in the month of Adar, Purim is celebrated as a reminder that when death was decreed, life was restored. When silence threatened survival, courage rose to speak, and when God seemed hidden, his hand was still guiding history. Though his name is never mentioned in the Book of Esther, his presence fills every moment. In every twist of fate, in every act of bravery, in every reversed decree, God was there. Thank you for joining us for this extraordinary journey. The story of Esther proves that even in the darkest of times, God raises ordinary people to do extraordinary things. He places us in the right place, at the right moment, for a purpose far greater than we can see. You, too, were made for such a time as this. This project has taken great effort from our entire team. Every word, every scene has been crafted with dedication and love, because we believe these stories still live, still speak, still change lives. If this story has moved you, if it stirred something in your heart, please share it. Like the video, leave us a comment and subscribe to the channel, because this is only the beginning.